Welcome to Learning Education and National Development on Moodle. I am your facilitator, Ndume MS. So today we'll look at the relationship between education and national development. The relationship between education and national development. So by the end of this unit, we should be able to discuss modernization theory, we should be able to discuss human capital theory, and we should be able to discuss the role of technology as a tool for national development. So in today's lesson, we'll concentrate on modernization theory. So coming to the term modernization theory is a macro theory with a historical and sociological inspiration. It is a macro theory with a historical and sociological inspiration. Also, modernization theory can be defined as a concept in the sphere of social sciences that refers to a process in which a society goes through urbanization, industrialization, and other social changes that completely transforms the lives of individuals. So in this definition, you'll be able to see that when a society goes through modernization, there are certain elements that will be seen that society will go through. The first one is urbanization. The society will go through urbanization, and the second element is industrialization. The society will go through industrialization. And there should be a complete transformation of the lives of individuals within that particular society. Also, in the old days, during the period of the First and Second World War, modernization was defined as a society that evolves from barbarism to a greater levels of development and civilization. So when we say a society evolves from barbarism, during the period of the First and Second World War, there was so much turmoil in the world, there was so much confusion, there was so much unrest in the society. There was too much of cruelty, fighting, and therefore, in those days, modernization was defined as a process by which a society will evolve from the fighting, from the turmoil, from the barbarism to a greater levels of development and civilization. So these are the definitions for modernization. So having looked at that, we can move on and we can simply say that modernization theory was predicted or developed on two distinctive and yet related disciplines. So modernization theory, it was predicted, or rather it developed based on two distinctive and yet related disciplines. And basically these are classical evolutionary theory and functionalist theory. So coming to classical evolutionary theory, so regarding this theory, it states that it assumes that social change in a society is in directional from a primitive society to an advanced state. Meaning, if you are using this theory, a society or a state should develop from something primitive to something that is more advanced. So that the direction of development, it's from a primitive society into something that is more advanced. So this theory states that the movement of development towards the final is good. Meaning as you are moving, development will move from something that is primitive and then to something that is final. And as you are moving towards the final stage, development is good. This theory also assumes that the rate of social change is slow and gradual. So according to this theory, development will not just happen just there suddenly. It will take time. Development is gradual. So the society will develop from a primitive society into something that is more advanced or that is developed. But development, it goes through. It's a gradual process. Yeah. Therefore, it can be argued out that the process of development from primitive to complex state would take centuries to complete. So, according to this theory, development, when a society is undergoing through development from a primitive society into a more advanced stage, development would take centuries to complete. So having looked at classical evolutionary theory, we can move ahead, go on to look at the functionalist theory. So when you look at the functionalist theory, it is different from the classical evolutionary theory in that the functionalist theory, it states that human society is like a biological organism with different parts corresponding to different institutions that make up a society. Just as a body is made up of different parts, and in order for the body to function well, all the parts should agree. There should be that collaboration between all the parts of the body, just like a society. So this theory says that a society is more like a human body with different parts. A society has different parts, and in order for development to take place, all the parts of the society should work together. They should work hand in hand, and they should work together. And this, when they work together, they are more likely to bring about a development. So this theory, it says that each part of a society, it performs a specific function that every society must perform to maintain a social public. So there's a difference between classical evolutionary theory and functionalist theory. Having looked at that, we can move on to look at the three main historical elements which were favorable to the inception of the modernization theory. So we need to know that there were certain historical elements that contributed to the emergence of modernization theory, or to the inception of modernization theory. To start with, the first historical element is that there was the rise of the United States as a superpower, and this occurred after the Second World War. And after the Second World War, Western nations such as Great Britain, France, and Germany, these were weakened by World War II, and then the United States emerged as a superpower. So what happened was that the United States emerged from the war strengthened, and they became a world leader with the implementation of a Marshall Plan to reconstruct what on Western Europe. So this contributed to the emergence of modernization theory. Secondly, there was the spread of the United World Communist Movement. There was the spread of the United World Communist Movement. For instance, the former Soviet Union had to extend its influence not only to the European, to Eastern Europe, but as well as China and Korea. And this somehow led to the emergence or to the inception of the modernization theory. And then The last one is that there was the breakdown of European colonial empires in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America, giving birth to many new nations or states. So these new states, they were in search of a model of development to promote the economy and enhance their political independence. And these actually, the three, they contributed to the inception of the modernization theory. So we can move on to look at the characteristics of a modern society. In fact, there are a lot of characteristics, but I'll just mention a few. So according to the modernization theory, a modernized society is, this is a society that is more productive. Wherever you find productivity in a society, just know that that society is modernized. This is a society where people are better educated, there are advances, technological advancement that enhance the education of people. And then this is a society where people in need receive more welfare. And also, it's a society which have a social structure differentiation. For instance, in a modernized society, there is clear definition of functions and political roles from national institutions. And then lastly, we'll look at the major assumptions of modernization theory. So there are a lot of assumptions regarding the modernization theory. So the first assumption is that modernization is a phased process. It is a phased process, which means that modernization doesn't just occur haphazardly, no. It occurs in stages. If a society is developing from primitive to something that is developed, it will go through the stages. It will go through the stages. So modernization theory is a phased process which occurs in stages. And you cannot jump a stage. You have to go through all the stages. Then the other assumption is that modernization is a harmonizing process. It is a harmonizing process, which means that modernization produces convergence among societies. And the more modernized a society becomes, the more they resemble each other. So as these nations are developing, they'll begin resembling each other. So this shows that modernization is a harmonizing process. The third assumption is that modernization is a Europeanization or Americanization process. Meaning if a society is going through modernization, it has to be Europeanized or Americanized. Meaning it will have those characteristics from the European countries and American countries. Also, the other assumption is that modernization, it is an irreversible process. Once modernization occurs, it cannot be reversed. It is also a progressive process which is inevitable and desirable. It is also a progressive process which is inevitable and desirable. Then lastly, we can say modernization theory, it is a systematic process, meaning it occurs in a systematic way. So these are the major assumptions of modernization theory. So we've come to the end of our lesson. Next time we meet, we'll look at human capital theory.